There are many derivations of punk genres in speculative fiction. The first was cyberpunk, a term that first came into public consciousness after William Gibson's groundbreaking novel Neuromancer. As someone who was around in the punk movement in the 80s, where I knew a guy who padlocked a chain around his neck and threw away the key, and piercings were taking a huge safety pin and poking it through your cheek yourself. There was no one to go to for that type of piercing. So I always appreciated the punk aspect of cyberpunk, which I saw was gritty and raw, and if there were any politics involved, it was anti-corporate, pro-anarchy. Then came steampunk, which merged a Victorian-era aesthetic into retro-futuristic technology, but it lost that edginess that I associated with punk. And of course, there are other punks like solar punk, which I did a video on, which you can see up here. Then I read China Mieville, and I began hearing about a genre that described his work called Dieselpunk, which perfectly encapsulated China Mieville's writing because, in my opinion, he put the punk back into literature. So I want to talk about Dieselpunk, which is a subgenre of speculative fiction, maybe towing the line between science fiction and fantasy, though I think most people would view it more on the fantasy end, but it blends diesel-based technology from the 20s through the 40s with its own retro-futuristic technology. Unlike its cousin steampunk, which is often optimistic and funny, Dieselpunk, at least as China Mieville writes it, is more dark and pessimistic. Now, full disclosure, the only Dieselpunk I've read is China Mieville, so take that as what you will, but right here, right now, I am declaring China Mieville as the God Emperor of Dieselpunk. Who am I? I am the booktube goddess, the #1 drag queen booktuber on YouTube. Unfortunately, China Mieville hasn't published much recently, but its heyday was in the very early 2000s. He's a British author, and the first novel that caught my attention was a little-known masterpiece called Perdido Street Station, published in 2000. This was the first novel set in the world of Bath Lag, and won the Arthur C. Clarke Award, the British Fantasy Award, was nominated for both a Hugo and a Nebula, which he didn't win because there was another British author by the name of Neil Gaiman who published American Gods. Perdido Street Station takes place in the sprawling metropolis of New Crobuzon, a city teeming with life, culture, and secrets. It's a city where anything is possible, where magic and science coexist, and where the most bizarre creatures roam free. The main character is Isaac, a scientist who is commissioned by a strange half-bird creature to help her regain her ability to fly. But that sets him on a paranoid adventure into the dark corners of society. Though Isaac is human, there are so many interesting other races that have some similarities to other mythologies, but still has a really unique spin. Like Isaac's girlfriend has the head of a scarab beetle, so that vaguely references Egyptian mythology. And then there's a race of frog people called the Vodianoi, which has origins in Slavic fairy tales, but there's also cactus people and vampire moths and lobster centaurs. China Mieville's world building is second to none. The intricate, dark, gritty, raw, detailed world he has created feels shockingly real, even though it's so wildly fantastical and terrifying. Mieville followed up with 2 more novels set in the same world, and they do read as standalone novels. The Scar was published in 2002 and also won the British Fantasy Award, and was nominated for a Hugo and Philip K. Dick and Arthur C. Clarke Awards. The story references events of Perdido Street Station, but again, this is a standalone novel. Instead of the city of New Crobuzon, we are taken to the great oceans of Bass Lag aboard a ship that is hijacked by the Armada, a fleet of pirate ships chained together as a floating city. Now, the novel's title, The Scar, refers to a 1,000-mile-long scar on the ocean's floor, which is some sort of bottomless rift that was created by multiplanar entities known as the Ghost Head Empire, which brought possibility science to Bass Lag. The pirates are trying to raise this gargantuan extraplanar sea creature for some purpose, and more layers of Mieville's world building is revealed, and it is dark, disturbing, and brilliant. The last Bass Lag novel is The Iron Council, and yes, I have a signed copy. You can see Mieville's signature right up here. This novel was published in 2004, winning the Arthur C. Clarke and Locus Awards, and was nominated for the World Fantasy and Hugo Awards. Instead of a city or ocean, this time we are introduced to an enormous train that was hijacked by the Workers' Revolution in their rebellion against the Transcontinental Railroad Trust. Basically, the chain is constantly on the run and ruled by the Iron Council. The city of New Crobuzon wants to stop the train because it is a symbol of rebellion. And you'd think that it'd be easy to stop a train because you know where the tracks are. Au contraire, mon frere. The way this train moves is that the track is constantly being taken apart in the back and then laid out again in the front, so it can perpetually move wherever it wants to. The novel follows revolutionaries in New Crobuzon searching for the Iron Council train. These three novels, I think, are what Dieselpunk is or should be all about. And it is a reminder that the word punk originally represented a raw, gritty, hyper-real anarchy. Mieville went on to write several other really excellent books, including Kraken, and a middle grade novel called Unlondon, and another of my favorites, The City in the City, which is about a city that is spread between two alternate dimensions. And the novel is kind of a police procedural, meets Everything Everywhere All at Once. The City in the City did win a Hugo, as well as a bunch of other awards, but I'll categorize that as more firmly in science fiction, though Wikipedia called it weird fiction. I'm curious if there are other Dieselpunk novels that I'm not aware of. Let me know down in the comments, but I will stand by my man, China Mieville, as the epitome or God Emperor of Dieselpunk. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.